Welcome back to From the Couch Sports. My name is Connor, I'm your host, and I want to get into a lot of stuff today. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about as far as MMA goes, and I also want to touch on some other topics as well, a little bit of football and whatnot too. But to kick things off, I want to talk about this this Jon Jones incident. This is from last year. I believe it was September, October. It was basically Jon Jones went to his Hall of Fame ceremony in Vegas, and he had the incident with the police. And the police video came out the other night, and since it came out, everybody has just been kind of trashing on Jon. Even more than normal. For a guy who has as many controversial things happen in his life. The media sure doesn't hold back. People online, they're not holding back their punches. Jon Jones's flaws have been in front of the mainstream media for the last decade or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And it's sad. I'm not here to talk and to defend his actions. In my opinion, when it comes to the sport of MMA, Jon Jones is second to none. He's arguably the greatest of all time, never lost, not like officially lost, besides the loss due to disqualification from the illegal strikes. He's been a ton of fun to watch. But Jon Jones is also, he's struggled with his demons very publicly. And, I know a lot of people want to just bash on him because he's repeatedly struggled. It's not just been a one-time thing. He's had multiple times where he struggles. He has these slip-ups with the law, with PEDs and whatnot, and he comes out apologetic and usually seems like he's very sincere that he wants to change and improve his life and do it for the better. And then he kind of slips up again, and it continues. And we can look at this two different ways. We can look at it as this is Jon Jones. He's just saying these things to because this is what people want to hear, that he's apologetic and whatnot, but he really isn't, and he's just going to continue down the same path. But we could also look at it as this is a human being. We forget, like, the people we see on TV are humans just like us. Obviously most people don't do all the things that Jon has done, and but most people aren't also light heavyweight champion of the world, especially at such a young age. He's the youngest champion in UFC history, and lives his entire life in front of everyone, in the social media era. And I think to me, Jon Jones, he struggles heavily with his demons. And some of these last two videos that I've seen make me kind of sad for Jon. Like you can tell that he's struggling. He's some of the things he said are borderline suicidal. Like he's telling a cop to kill him and whatnot. He had the incident in 2020 with him shooting his firearm in the air and being found drunk in his car. And like we have all these incidents. He does it in front of the whole world. And like he came out recently too, saying that his fiance left him, and everyone's just dumping on Jon Jones. It's and I understand. Like, I'm not here to promote domestic violence. I'm absolutely not a supporter. I'm not defending any kind of actions. But ultimately, whether or not Jon Jones wants to be better and truly cares, that's between him and God. That's not something that anybody is in the position to defend. To argue one way or the other. It's that's just something that only Jon Jones knows. Whether or not he really cares or not. And completely dumping on him. He especially after he breaks the news yesterday, that his fiance left him. He's been engaged for like years, and it's I also I understand, like, people are saying, we don't want to have like sympathy for Jon Jones. He put himself in this situation, but you also, like, I'm not saying you got to be sympathetic for him because his girl left him, but this is a guy who clearly struggles in life. He does it publicly where normally people struggle, and normally people get DUIs and nobody gives a crap because they're not famous UFC fighter. So he's living his life in the public. He clearly has problems with alcohol, and now his girl's left him, and I just hope that this doesn't lead to him being in a darker spot. Like, he's shown these things with his fiance, like, even some of these kind of borderline suicidal things, and I don't want something bad to happen to Jon. Also, I don't want Jon to continue to slip up as well. But it's a very tough subject, and me personally, I have had a firsthand experience with multiple family members that are raging alcoholics. In 2020, I lost my uncle because he basically drank himself to death. And I've seen it in my own life from people very close to me. That alcohol can completely ruin a person. Like my uncle, very close to the family. We've countless times we tried to get him to stop drinking. And it got to a point where, he was so dependent on drinking alcohol that he cut his family off, didn't let them know his medical situation. He got remarried and didn't tell anybody in the family, and then he died because he didn't warn anyone, didn't let anyone know that he wasn't doing good, and it was too late. And obviously the situations aren't the same, but for someone who's clearly struggles with alcoholism, I feel for the guy. I'm like I said, I'm not defending any of his actions that he's made, but if you're an alcoholic, you truly should get help. It's not good for you. It's not good for your future. My uncle died and he left behind a 20-year-old daughter. My uncle died like to me this hits home because I'm such a big fan of sports, but my uncle grew up his entire life a Bengals fan, never watching them really be good since, like, in the 80s when he was a young kid. And then, like, he passes away. They draft Joe Burrow, and they're in the Super Bowl 2 years later. And it's like, this is, it's sad for me seeing something like that. It was sad for my family even able to see the Bengals in the Super Bowl. It's tough. And in Jon's situation, like, this is a guy who has all the talent in the world. He just continues to screw up and make these mistakes. But ultimately, I think Jon Jones is a human, and not saying that we need to support the decisions he's made, the mistakes he's made, but to hope that he gets well. And personally, I've never looked at these situations and thought, like, I want Jon to lose in his fight. I think honestly that could make things worse. I do think, like, with everything that's happened, Jon Jones going and becoming heavyweight champion of the world would be a wonderful story. Further solidify his legacy as, the greatest MMA fighter of all time. But, we very well could see the downturn of Jon Jones. Like, I talked about it in our last video. Like, we've seen McGregor kind of struggles with alcohol as well. They're just in different ways. McGregor's clearly like the angry drunk trying to make everybody drink proper 12, get in fights, whatnot. Jon Jones is clearly like more of a emotional drunk. Like, we've seen in these videos, like, you can tell he's in a dark spot. And as a fan of Jon Jones, the MMA fighter, I genuinely hope that he gets the help that he needs so that he can have that, close to his career, that he deserves, because he really has had, the most dominant MMA career arguably of all time. So that's just my take on it. Um, it kind of brings me up to another, point of discussion. Like this this dude Bryce Mitchell goes on the Ariel Helwani show, the MMA Hour, and he says a whole bunch of crazy stuff, like, stuff that you could consider like conspiracy theory and whatnot. And he's also getting people dumping on him, just all because of an opinion. And for me, I don't set out to watch sports because certain athlete follows my political views or religious views or anything like that. I go out to watch sports because they entertain me. And Jon Jones, when he's in the octagon, he entertains me. What he does outside, like, you know, not defending the actions, but what he does outside of the octagon is not what I'm watching him for. And those actions outside, they don't necessarily make me want to root for him to lose necessarily. And this is what I've seen with the Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell goes on, he's passionate about certain subjects. Maybe he's wrong about some subjects, but the great thing about Ariel is he was willing to continue the interview. They can have a civilized discussion whether or not they agree with certain things, and they keep it moving. You can still, back in the day, we used to live in a time where you can have a close friend that completely disagrees with most of your beliefs and whatnot, but you can still be friends. And I look at these things the same. Like, we see people like say, I hope Colby loses or Jorge loses, Bryce Mitchell loses. Like, you get these kind of groups of people that legit want to see people fail specifically because of their beliefs. And these beliefs that people have are based on the life experience that they've grown through. So when Masvidal gives his beliefs, it's it's through what he's lived through himself, what his family has lived through. And they just bash on someone and I hope they lose because they don't believe the same thing as me. That's that's weak-minded in my opinion. We're not kids. These are literally cage fighters. I don't understand the fascination with needing to agree with a cage fighter when it comes to what their beliefs are outside of the ring. Like Sean Strickland too. Some of these dudes say some crazy things. Agree or disagree with them. It's helping promote them as a fighter. For the most part, any publicity is good publicity. Obviously, you don't want some of the negative arrests or whatnot in the media, but going on Sean Strickland saying that he wants to kill someone in the octagon, or Bryce Mitchell saying that some of these mass shootings were government inside jobs, like that's creating publicity for these guys. That's creating it's creating more buzz around them. People are going to tune in more now for Bryce Mitchell's next fight. I believe it's next month. They're going to tune in more now because of the statements he made. My only thing is, it's like, don't tune in just because you want to see him get knocked out or whatever. Tune in because it's interesting. Tune in because, here's a guy saying some crazy stuff. He comes from Arkansas. Whether or not you agree or disagree with it, tune in. It's fascinating. I don't have to agree or with every single person that I talk to. Like, where did society change where, just because someone has different political beliefs than me, I want to see them get knocked out in the cage? Like, it's not how it should be at all. I watch sports for the entertainment. MMA specifically, I think in my mind, it's one of the most entertaining sports. It's a sport that, there's nothing really like it. I've talked about it with my brother before. It's like, imagine in a basketball game, you're up by 20 and your opposing team can hit one shot to win the game out of nowhere. Like, it's such a fascinating sport. And it makes fascinating individuals that compete in the sport. And to me, it's just, you know, what are we doing if we're completely rooting for, a fighter because he believes the same thing politically as you? We literally have MMA fighters from all over the world. There's certain Russian guys who don't believe women should fight MMA. There's Republicans, Democrats. There's literally everything in MMA. And enjoy MMA for what it is, for the entertainment aspect of it. You don't have to go so far to, bash someone's mistakes or hate on someone and, pray for them to lose just because they disagree with you and, might have a different opinion on the way the world is, and through it's all through their perspective, through their opinions. And to me, it's fascinating. It's interesting to see a guy like, Bryce Mitchell is a guy from Arkansas who's got all these, beliefs, and he's going to go in there and he's going to fight a guy who has a totally different stylistic matchup than him, that's from Brazil. So it's very interesting to me. But that's just my take on it. I don't think Bryce Mitchell saying something that you disagree with should warrant you wanting to get knocked out. I think it's interesting. I think Bryce Mitchell's a ton of fun to watch, regardless of what he believes in. He's got an excellent ground game, and I'm gonna tune into his next fight, whether he believes the Earth is flat or not. I don't think he actually said that, but you get the point. But I want to move on to cover some of the UFC card that's coming up this weekend, the Vegas card. So this was originally going to be Islam versus Beneil Dariush. Dariush got injured, and rumor has it they called most of the top 10 trying to get another guy for Islam. Basically, Islam wants this fight to propel himself into a title shot. And it's going to be tough because they give him unranked Bobby Green. Bobby Green is, on a surge. He's been in the media a lot. He's a ton of fun to watch. He's a guy who's paid his dues in the game. He's been in the MMA for a long, long time. And he's a ton of fun to watch. He's an interesting fighter, but he's also not ranked. So if Islam wins, which, most likely he will based on the odds, if he wins, does he still earn a title shot when both of his last fights were late replacements? Like, he's going to for sure want the title shot. He's going to use the win streak and whatnot to defend it. But it brings an interesting question. And, in this fight, I'm curious to see how Bobby Green's going to do on the feet. I think it was his coach came out and said that Bobby Green's not going to get taken down a single time in the fight. It's like, if that happens, Bobby Green might be fighting for a title later this year, because that's the path to victory. The problem is these dudes that train with Khabib, that are from Dagestan, everyone they face has the same game plan. If I don't get taken down, I'm probably going to win this fight because I can stand up and, win that way. But everyone that's faced these guys also gets taken down. Like, Islam is just that good, that good at what he does. So, in my opinion, he's probably going to take Bobby Green down. I'd be curious to see how long Bobby Green can stay in there. If Bobby Green's able to do anything on the feet, he for sure has a chance. He's definitely the better technical boxer, and he's better standing up. But if Islam brings it to the ground, there's a good chance that Islam finishes the fight. Depending on when it happens in the first round, I think if he gets a takedown within the first couple minutes, he could probably finish it in the first round. Otherwise, we'll see if it goes longer in the fight. But that's just my take on it. I think Islam is probably the favorite to win. And then, covering some of the other fights, we have Misha Cirkunov and Wellington Truman. Misha's on a losing streak, but he's also kind of moving down from 205 to middleweight. He's fought a ton of dudes at light heavyweight, though. He fought Ryan Spann. He fought Jimmy Crute, Johnny Walker, Glover, Volkan Ozdemir, Krylov, Ian Kutaloba. He's fought pretty much all the big names at 205. Whether he's won or not, he's kind of moving down. And, he's a solid fighter, especially, being somewhat bigger for the weight class. We'll see kind of if he's able to bounce back and get a win here. I would say his ground game's going to give him a little bit of an advantage on that aspect. But then as far as Turman, I'm sorry if I said Truman before. I believe it's Turman. He's much younger. He's won 2 and lost 3 in his last 5. Most recently beating Sam Alvey by split decision. And then he also lost recently to Bruno Silva. So that's going to be another interesting fight at 185. And then moving on to this, lightweight, in my opinion, is one of the funnest divisions in the UFC. But also this card itself is stacked to the gills with lightweight fights. So we have Arman Sarukian versus Joel Alvarez, and this is a super exciting matchup. 2 really good young elite fighters. They're both good on the ground. Both have solid stand-up. I think Arman is probably more all around. But like this, Arman is a dude who went with Islam and was like grappling with him for the full fight with him. And he's a guy. I think he only has 2 losses. And then Alvarez, on the other hand, Alvarez is super good jiu-jitsu fighter. Standing up, he's got some crazy elbows. Like he throws those things like punches, good kicks. 16 of his 19 wins were via submission though. So he for sure is, going for the submission. He has had trouble making weight. So we'll see, is he able to make 155 this time around? I think he failed the last couple times. But this is going to be one of the funnest fights. Like you got a guy in Arman that like was able to take the fight to Islam, grapple with Islam, so he's a very elite grappler, good on the feet as well. And then Alvarez is like not the same stylistically, but they're both good all around. And then they both have very, very good ground games. So I think the scrambles and the ground action in this game is probably going to be really fun to watch. And then I'd be curious like to see how things go while the fight's standing up as well. And also like whose grappling is superior, I think is going to be interesting as well. And then moving on from that, we have Arman Petrosian and Gregory Rodriguez. This is Arman's UFC debut. His last fight, he won a Contender Series with a kick and a ground and pound finish. And then Gregory is on a 4-fight win streak. So both fighters coming into this, one of them's making his debut, but the other's on this nice win streak. Both have the ability to finish the fight. I think this is going to be a fun fight to watch as well. And then there's a couple kind of undercard fights I want to talk about as well that I'm interested in. The Alejandro Perez versus Jonathan Martinez should be a really fun fight. Both these guys fight at a high pace, and they're very well-rounded. And then you get Terrence McKinney versus Fares Ziam. McKinney, his UFC debut, he comes in on short notice. He gets a knockout in 7 seconds. He dropped the guy like in the first 2 seconds or so, and then he finished it on the ground. So he's got crazy powerful hands. Most of his fights have been firefights. Like even in some of his losses, he's got knocked out. But he's really taken it to the fight. He also has like a background in wrestling, so I'm curious if he utilizes more of the wrestling in this fight. Some of his early fights, he did get a lot of finishes through submission and whatnot as well. So I'd be curious to see kind of how he mixes up the wrestling in this fight. And then Ziam, he's got good kicking ability. He's kind of trained all around as well, but I would say he's probably, gonna try to kickbox with Terrence McKinney, and so I'm interested in this. This is also good, like 2 young prospects in the lightweight division. And then we got Zhu Rong versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Rong trains at ATT. He's finished 90% of his wins just about with 12 KOs and 4 submissions. And then Bahamondes, His most recent fight was a ton of fun to watch. This was against Roosevelt Roberts. And they were getting towards the very end of the fight. It was a 3-round fight. And Ignacio threw a spinning heel kick and landed with 5 seconds in the fight and knocked out Roberts just cold, knocked out cold, stiff. That was a crazy fight. To do that at the very end of the fight was crazy too. It's kind of like I'm just throwing last second whatever I can. And then another one that's interesting, Michael Gilmore. He's also on this card. He's kind of been like a fill-in guy. Like, he came on the Ultimate Fighter and he was a late replacement, and he lost on the Ultimate Fighter. And then on the main event for the Ultimate Fighter, he lost on that undercard as well. So I'm interested to see, like, this is a guy who's like later in his career. Interesting to see if he, can make something. But it does make me kind of think, like, I feel like the Ultimate Fighter should be gotten rid of. They don't pick the super entertaining coaches anymore, and pretty much everyone that's like a decent fighter makes it into the UFC. Like, you got to go through all this to make it on through the Ultimate Fighter. Like, you're living in a house with someone, with all these dudes, and fighting like multiple times just to get through the Ultimate Fighter, and then you win, and like you might be getting paid more than the other guys, but like you win, and some of the guys that you beat are also in the UFC, and it's just like, doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of it? When like you go on the Contender Series, for example, and you get a nice win and you're in the UFC, you don't have to go through the whole weeks worth of training and living in a house with a bunch of dudes and whatnot. So that's just kind of my opinion on it. It's very odd. And then I also, kind of moving on from the MMA UFC, we've been talking about the UFC for a long time. I want to get into some of the things that have recently changed. So the NFL Combine, it's coming up this next week. Originally they were going to have some like bubble restrictions for these athletes, which is just crazy because they didn't have any of this, for the playoffs, for the regular season. And this is like the first year back because last year the Combine kind of got ruined because of COVID. And like, so basically all the agents of the players, they got together and they're like, our athletes are not going to compete if you force all these bubble restrictions. So thankfully the NFL was able to release those. So it should be like a relatively normal NFL Combine. And that's something I'm going to cover like later this next week. I want to talk a lot about the Combine. I think this is going to set up a lot when it comes to mock drafts and, players moving up on boards, moving down the board, whatnot. So that's very interesting. And then I want to talk about this Kyrie situation. So it's funny because, New York had these mandates in place, made zero sense. Basically, if you didn't have the shot and you played on a different team and you come to New York, you can play against the Nets in Brooklyn. But if you're Kyrie, who also didn't have the shot, and you play for the Nets, you're not allowed to play home games. And this is a stupid thing the whole time. Shout out to Kyrie for standing his ground. Like we had the time where all the people who had the shot were getting sick, so they allowed Kyrie to come in and play away games. He's just proved this whole time that it was a ridiculous rule to have in the first place. Meanwhile, you get thousands of people telling him, "Oh, you should have just taken the shot, Kyrie." Like, just because you're a basketball player, you shouldn't care about your health, nothing like that. Your opinions outside of basketball, they didn't matter to people. But now it's funny because New York is also lifting that mandate as well. So here in the next couple weeks, Kyrie will be able to play every single game. And it's disappointing because a stupid rule like that basically sat out Kyrie half the season. But now, like, getting all the pieces together, this Nets team could be very dangerous, and they very well might compete for a championship this year. I think the Eastern Conference is going to be very open and up for the taking. And if things click together, I think Ben Simmons fits this team better than James Harden did. You got Kyrie, you got KD, elite scorers. You add in Ben Simmons, who is a great passer. He can guard all five positions. One of the best defensive players in basketball. They can do a lot of different things here, and I think this makes the Nets even more dangerous, especially adding Seth Curry. I think they're going to be dangerous come down to the end of the season. Now, they are going to have to make a push so that they're in the playoffs and everything and able to do that. But that's just my take on it. And then, the last thing I want to talk about. This is a rumor that was released recently. Basically, the New York Jets are in love with Kyle Hamilton. They're very interested in Kyle Hamilton, doing their research on him. This news comes out and it's like basically saying, like, implying like the Jets are going to take him fourth overall. Like, I want to make things very clear. Right now, the media is full of it completely, especially when it comes to what a team's interested in when it comes to the draft. Now, I'll admit there is certainly teams that will leak some of this information. But, like, right now, 32 teams are interested in Kyle Hamilton. Like, this is a guy who's, like, transcendent prospect at the safety position. And he's not just, like, a box safety. He's not a, more of the linebacker safety. He's like a coverage safety that's a ball hawk. So, of course, the Jets are interested in him. This does not mean that they're going to take him fourth overall. They might be interested in some other guy even more than Kyle Hamilton. And most likely, if anyone follows, I have these Jets segments because I'm a Jets fan. So, if anyone follows the Jets, they know two things. They know Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, both guys, love the offensive and defensive line. So to even imagine that like we're going to go in there and draft Kyle Hamilton fourth overall, it's just idiotic. The only chances of that happening is if somehow both top edge rushers and top linemen were off the board, which literally can't happen because we draft fourth. So it's just like, if Kyle Hamilton's sitting at 10th overall, maybe the Jets are interested in. But like right now, hearing that someone's interested in this and that, it's all dumb because we haven't even had free agency yet. So let's say the Jets go out and they sign a good safety like Jesse Bates or Marcus Williams. They're not going to have the need for Kyle Hamilton. Yeah, and they're not, even if they do still have another hole at safety, it's not like they're going to go, oh, we got this one other hole at safety, we're going to overdraft and take, not necessarily saying that he would be overdrafted, like, because he's a great prospect, but like that's the team is not going to double down and invest that heavily at the safety position, especially when we're coming off the backs of trading Jamal Adams because we didn't want to invest that heavily at the safety position. So I think we're going to invest in the offensive or defensive line at picks 4, and 10 is probably going to be either the opposite or, a weapon for Zach Wilson to work with. So, like these stories are going to continue to come out. Next week, the Jets are going to be in love with whatever other name prospect, even if it is a guy the Jets are in love with. Until it actually happens, it's all smoke. Let's wait till free agency comes. Wait till after the combine. Let things settle down. Let the team do the homework. Go through the pro days, and then when we come to draft day, if the Jets have, already taken care of the O-line, the D-line, and we don't have a safety, then like cool, we can have this discussion. But having it this soon is just crazy, and not to mention like, it doesn't seem like something that would happen. But like every year, Jets fans they get involved in like passionate about like certain prospects. Like last year was let's keep Sam Darnold and draft Kyle Pitts because tight end is more important to have than a QB, and we need to give Sam the right time with the right offensive coordinator and whatnot. And it's just like I could understand the argument, but everyone that knows Joe Douglas knew that was not ever going to happen. And now I feel pretty confident saying the same thing. Like, Kyle Hamilton is not going to the Jets at 4 overall. You can be a Jets fan and beg them all you want for this to happen. It's not going to happen. Rich Cimini or whatever other beat writer of the Jets want to make these headlines all off season because they don't have nothing else to write about. So they got to write about, here's a position in need for the Jets. I'm sure the Jets like this guy because, of course, they do. He's Kyle Hamilton. Does that mean that they're going to draft him at 4 overall? No, it doesn't. But as always, thanks for tuning in. If you like the content, like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Jones situation? On Bryce Mitchell, the UFC card this weekend, the NFL Combine, Kyrie, and then the Jets. Let me know. But as always,